Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Jeff Landau with Keller Williams and Team 805 Real Estate. I am joined with a friend of mine who happens to be an expert in what we'll be speaking about today, David Gering. We are going to talk with David. He prepares businesses to manage their risk and help them recover from major disruptions. His company is called Business Resilience Solutions, and he is a business continuity management consultant. He has over 15 years of experience. His first 10 were with Nestlé USA before doing business continuity consulting on his own. He's born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, and he's going to be sharing some insights you probably haven't heard that will help you in both your personal and your business lives. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Very, very happy to have you here. Just so our listeners can get a little bit better acquainted with you, can you share a little bit more about your background and experience?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley to begin with, and I've been alive long enough so that I lived through the Sylmar earthquake in 71 and the Northridge earthquake in 94 and all the various wildfires that have occurred through the decades. So I'm very familiar with what's gone on in Southern California in terms of disasters and disruptions. Um, and because I sleep better at night, I practice what I preach. I believe in preparedness. It makes me feel more confident going into uncertain times. As you said, I worked for Nestle for 10 years and I worked with each of their 25 factories in helping their teams build business recovery plans. And then I conducted exercises to help them to learn how to use those plans. And they were, in fact, used on a number of occasions when a actual disruption occurred. So it's very rewarding to me to take people through the process, but it's also important for me to be able to evangelize about preparedness in general for everybody.
And you would be better off doing that than me because my go bag is still folded up empty in my closet. So that's why you're here,
Okay,
and I'm not doing it on my own.
I am not passing judgment, but you should have one in your closet and one in your car and a comfortable pair of shoes in the trunk.
I'm sure I will change my approach at the end of
Good.
this.
All right.
So, as David mentioned, he has a wealth of knowledge on how to help businesses. We're going to focus more on the personal part, and we will touch a little bit on the business part as well. So,
Sure.
what's the mindset that we need to have when approaching disaster, and what should we expect during any disaster?
Questions. First and foremost, as the wildfires last month taught us, there's never going to be enough. There's never going to be enough water. There's never going to be enough firefighters, law enforcement, helicopters, airplanes. There simply will not be enough to avoid a catastrophe. Plain and simple, it doesn't matter. The reality is we had more aircraft fighting these fires than ever before. We had thousands and thousands of firefighters on the lines in both of the major fires. Um, it didn't stop the conflagration. And we need to factor into our own planning the fact that there will never be enough to stop a catastrophe from happening. The second thing is that our reactions to an emergency can either be helpful or not. And it's important to recognize that preparation will improve the odds that our responses will help rather than hurt ourselves. Um, So, what does this boil down to? In an emergency, that's not the time to be trying to think things through and develop a strategy. In an emergency, you're only going to have time to react as effectively as you have prepared. Plain and simple, if you're not prepared, it's going to be haphazard at best. You won't have the clarity to be able to think things through and make strategic decisions. And this is for everybody, individuals and businesses. Beyond that, I think we all, to some degree, experience this, but stress compromises your ability to think clearly and to make good decisions. Preparation and planning is when you evaluate your options and you decide on a course of action when something happens. Do it when you have the luxury of time to be able to think these things through calmly, and you'll be a lot better off when the actual event occurs. Um, the other thing is, in an emergency, you're not going to have all the facts. You're not going to have all the information. You're going to be making decisions that are more like judgment calls. And we have to accept that and understand that you just do the best you can with the information you've got. The bottom line is that the more you've planned and prepared, the more effective and efficient you're going to be when an event occurs.
You're making me think of the presentation that you made, I think it was last week, when you said you thought with all of your preparation you were going to be able to get out of your house in 10 minutes and it took you 20 minutes, which, somebody listening said, well, no big deal, it's only 20 minutes. But I would venture to guess that you were the most prepared or one of the most prepared people in Simi Valley. And it's
All right.
still,
I'm not gonna claim to be the best, but let me just say I'm a single man. I live alone. I had a checklist for making sure that I didn't forget anything, and I was very focused on what I needed to do if I ever had to evacuate. Now, I didn't evacuate this time, but during the Woolsey fire about 6 years ago, I voluntarily evacuated. And I can tell you, at that time, I had a checklist. It was a very detailed checklist. I thought it was going to take me 10 minutes to execute it. It did take me 20 minutes. And I have a pretty simple situation here in that it's just me and I live alone. I don't have to worry about anybody else, but it took me 20 minutes to get evacuated. And that should tell everybody something that on top of everything else, if you've got an evacuation warning, don't wait. Just evacuate. Don't wait for the evacuation order because then it's going to be too late. If you wait for an evacuation order, you're just going to be running. You will not be able to do anything to properly evacuate.
and you mentioned the checklist.
Yeah.
Is would it be wrong to assume that your checklist is in addition to your go bag? Like you grab your go bag and throw it in, and then you go through your checklist, or are those the same thing?
Oh, no, 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 no. My go bag is just one aspect. It's just one of the things that I am going to put in my car when I evacuate. It's in addition to the various important files, specific belongings that I can't replace, important documents that I would need in case I need to make an insurance claim. Um, any of the things that I think I need to manage my life away from home. I'm not going to take everything in my house, obviously. I'll take enough clothes for a few days. But the main thing is, I'm going to have my laptops. I will have what I need so that if I had to operate somewhere else, I could do whatever I needed to do to manage my life and affairs. That's what got packed into my car. But the checklist for evacuating is more than just what I'm going to take. It's also going to be all those things that I would do to prepare my house to evacuate. So, what does that mean? If the fire was literally 5 or 10 minutes away, I would turn off my gas main. I would move a propane tank in my backyard as far away from my house as I could. I would make sure that the lights are on. I would leave my sliding glass doors unlocked. And I would make sure that if the firefighters needed to get into my house, they wouldn't have to bust down my steel front door. These are all things that I think about and do to prepare my house before I walk away. And those are things that you're going to forget in an actual event. I've got it all written down. I even have the checklist in an envelope with a little pencil to go with it so that I am prepared to walk around the house and check things off as I'm doing them.
Does your checklist, would it be a different checklist if you knew in advance you were going to lose your home? Or is your checklist only to evacuate with the thought you'll be home in a couple days?
No. Um, I live I live by an old saying, um, hope for the best and plan for the worst. And if I evacuate my house, I'm going to evacuate as if I'm going to lose it. That way I can be absolutely certain that I'm taking what I need. And when you think through what you need to have to run your life and affairs, you then realize all the stuff you don't need, all the stuff you don't need to take, all the stuff that can be replaced. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm still going back to the thought that it took you 20 minutes. You're a single guy and didn't have any pets.
No,
Wow. Okay. All right. Let me get focused. So anybody local in Ventura County, LA, I'm sure at this point, today's February 5th, 2025, we're all still kind of like fresh in the mindset of the catastrophe of the fires last month.
yeah,
Uh, a lot of thousands of people lost homes and more were evacuated. It's hard to find anybody that doesn't know somebody impacted in some way.
absolutely.
There's been a lot of news coverage, news conferences. Sometimes people are just saying stuff that we want to hear. Sometimes maybe people aren't qualified to be giving whatever kind of advice that they're giving. Considering you a expert, and I think that's extremely fair. What do you want to tell people that they may not have already heard? And maybe like what lessons do you see that may not have been covered yet?
Sure. Happy to do that. There's been some talk, and people may have been mentioning the fact that fires behave differently these days than they used to, but I want to really dwell on that for a minute. Um, both of us are old enough to remember fires 30 years ago. The fires that we're having now are completely different. And there are a number of different reasons for that, but I'll basically boil it down. Fires burn hotter, they burn faster, they're more violent, and they make it more difficult to fight. So, for instance, um, there are a lot more homes in the hills anywhere in Southern California than there used to be. That makes firefighting harder to do. Um, Beyond that, we've had droughts. We've got a lot of dry fuel that can go up very, very quickly. The kind of fuel that we have in Southern California tends to burn hotter because it's got oils in it. The winds have gotten stronger over the past 15, 20 years. And so imagine what does this tell you when you hear firefighters say they had to ground the aircraft? Why? Not because they couldn't fly in the wind, although that takes tremendous skill and a lot of courage. It was because whatever water they dropped wouldn't even make it to the ground, wouldn't do any good. So it's not that they don't have the skills, not that they don't have the aircraft. It's the fire conditions themselves that are so dramatically different that it's much harder to fight these fires than it used to be.
Yeah, you talk about 30 years ago, and I remember, when we had fires, if there were one, two, three, five homes lost, we go, oh my God, wow, I can't believe they couldn't save the homes. Now we all know. I mean, this last fire was measured in thousands, which is still mind-boggling. Um, while while wildfires are fresh in everybody's mind right now, of course, a couple days later we had rains. Fortunately, they weren't torrential downpours, though the fires in Santa Barbara a couple years ago were followed by heavy rains. And I believe, I could be getting it wrong, I believe there was more damage from the mudslides than from the fires themselves. Do you have any other advice or any other things people should be thinking about, whether it is power shutoffs, mudslides, earthquakes? What else? What other things
Sure.
should we be thinking about in addition to what we need to think about as far as fires go?
Okay. Let me just say that talking about Santa Barbara for a minute. So in December of whatever year it was, about 6, 7 years ago, Santa Barbara suffered a major wildfire. It did a lot of damage. It burned a lot of homes. The following month, we had torrential rains. And what it did was caused a flash flood. There is unfortunately, about 20 people died in the flash flooding. They all died because they were sleeping in their homes that were washed away in one night. They just died because they were asleep during a flash flood warning. Now, the lesson to be taken from that is if you live in a burn scar area or below a burn scar area, and there are predictions of rain, you should properly prepare your house. You should consider evacuating, but by no means should you ever, ever just go to sleep and think that you're going to be safe from a flash flood. There are 20 people who are dead because they thought it was okay to do. So, broadening the answer to um, public safety power shutoffs, to earthquake preparation, the more general rules here for personal preparation really boil down to making sure that you are personally able to, first of all, evacuate, to reunite with your family, and to be safe wherever you go. Um, I'm going to go back to the fire for one thing and say the following. It would be foolhardy for anybody in this day and age to say that they are going to make a stand and defend their home from a fire. People died doing that in this last set of fires. People died up north when the whole city burned down to the ground in Northern California. People stay at their own risk and at their own peril. So if it were me, I would never stay. My house is just not worth my life. That's what it boils down to. And same thing goes for the threat of a flash flood. Um, if you're in a house that has been badly damaged by the quake, it's a hard thing to do, but walking away from a badly damaged house is the right thing to do because there are going to be aftershocks, and those aftershocks are going to do more damage. And they could, in fact, be strong enough to bring down a house that's been damaged, but that seemed like it was safe to be in. It's not. And that happened a lot after the Northridge quake. So I'm on the side of being conservative about things. It's much better to be safe than sorry. And so whether it's a earthquake, a fire, or the threat of flash flooding, just get out. Just get out. Know where you're going to go, know what you're going to take, know how you're going to link up with your loved ones, know how you're going to communicate with them, have alternate methods for communicating, and make sure that everybody understands what you understand. Make sure everybody knows the plan so that they're going to be comfortable knowing how to get a hold of you and know how to link up with you to be sure that everybody's just going to be safe. Safety is by far the most important thing.
As far as getting in touch with people and having that plan in case people or families get separated, a lot of us rely on cell phones right now.
Yeah.
And while a cell phone tower can go down, I mean, we can't go to a payphone and put in 20 cents and call somebody. Do
Not
you,
anymore.
yeah, do you think that cell phones would be usable? Like, can you think of a circumstance where cell phones are just useless?
Yes. Let me explain I think the common wisdom. Uh, if a disaster does not actually damage cell towers, the cell phones, the cell signals will probably be jammed by people trying to use them all at the same time. Your best bet for communicating in a disaster would be to try using texting or email from your phone. They
Hmm.
may not go through right away, but they will eventually. And the other thing is prearrange to be able to call people out of Southern California. I have a dear friend in the Phoenix area and another, I have my cousin in New York, and they both have agreed to be my communication hub for me and for my loved ones. So everybody that I consider to be my most immediate loved ones, they have a wallet card from me. And that wallet card has a list of each of the people on it with their phone numbers. And on the back side, it has the names and phone numbers of the two out of state contacts. And they know that it's possible that it will be easier to get a hold of an out of state contact and get through to them than it will be to make calls within the area, even if the cell phone system is jammed up. You probably have better luck calling out of the area. So that's one thing. Um, but the bottom line is cell phones are going to be problematic after a major event, like an earthquake. They're going to be problematic because it's going to be a combination of things. Some cell phone towers are going to be damaged. The power going to the cell phone towers is going to be cut. and there are going to be many, many more people trying to use a reduced number of signals available.
Good things to be thinking about, of course.
Now, there's one more thing, Jeff, that I would say as it relates to communicating. Um, I don't have one now. I used to. I owned a sat phone, satellite phone. Um, a sat phone will be good as long as you can reach somebody else who has a cell phone that's working. Um, there are there's a new system that is being introduced by Starlink that will enable people to use their cell phones, and I presume this is going to be on a subscription basis, to use their cell phones to make calls via the Starlink satellite systems. I don't know enough about it to be able to comment one way or the other, but I can say that that would be a useful thing to pursue if people are really concerned about being able to make calls. Because even if the cell phone towers in your area are down, theoretically, being able to make a cell phone call via a satellite could be a game changer.
Have you heard of the apps that turn your phone into a walkie-talkie? I'm gonna go look for mine. I think it's called like Zello or something like that. Have you tried any of those?
I'm not familiar with them to be able to comment.
Zello. Okay. All right. Uh, Backpedaling a bit, when you mentioned prepping your house for an evacuation, you'd leave your lights on. Why
Yeah.
is that?
So that the firefighters can know that there's, that it would be easy for the firefighters to come in and see what was going on inside the house.
Okay.
But leaving the doors unlocked means that it makes it easier for them to verify that there's nobody in the house.
Okay.
Yes, I know you run the risk of looters getting into your house, but you know what? Um, that's a judgment call everybody's going to have to make independently.
So crazy to even have to say that, but yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about the Northridge earthquake and you're talking about the aftershocks, I was having a flashback. So this was in the 90s. We didn't have the flat panel screens. We had the CRT screens that I don't know how much they weighed. And I remember we were living in Sherman Oaks, and I remember sitting at my computer working from home during aftershocks, and the aftershocks were in the fives, so they were pretty strong. But after having been through almost seven, a five was, oh, I can just sit here and wait it out. And I didn't think about it until you just said it that maybe a 5.0 earthquake, let's just assume for the sake of this conversation that it wouldn't have done damage. However, after a 6.8, or really it was over seven, but I know that it was downgraded, so we didn't have to get as much federal aid, but that's a different conversation. So after a seven and after hundreds of fives, the 101st five could cause a lot more damage than it would have if it was just to fresh construction. So that's a really good point that I just wanted to emphasize, you know, after
Uh,
earthquake.
I don't know exactly where you were in Sherman Oaks in the 94 quake, but I can tell you that having grown up in Sherman Oaks, I'm very familiar with the area. And there was an area, a stretch of Ventura Boulevard near Van Nuys Boulevard that looked like a bomb had gone off, where building after building, brick buildings, were leveled for a stretch of a block or two. And we saw damage like that in other areas in Northridge. I vividly recall the bullocks at the Northridge Fashion Center. The whole wall came down of a three-story building facing Tampa. And that kind of damage is awesome to see in a very negative way, but there were a lot of homes that were damaged by the initial quake that um, a strong enough aftershock would create more damage
Right.
and more danger than if that aftershock was just a standalone quake. And it's important for people to understand the nature of earthquakes. There are going to be hundreds of aftershocks. Um, and we can go into a whole separate subject of what you're supposed to do during an earthquake. That's a whole topic in and of itself. But the bottom line is that an awful lot of buildings were damaged, sometimes in ways that weren't immediately noticeable, but that eventually caused them to be red tagged. And the mere fact that that happened should be something that causes us all to respect an earthquake and the potential damage it can do.
Now that we've covered disasters, I don't want to say thoroughly, but I would imagine relatively thoroughly anyway. What can we do better to prepare for disasters?
Okay, well, go ahead. Uh, I mean, I thoroughly believe that you can prepare and that if you prepare, you're going to be better off, a lot better off. And by that, I mean you will have thought things through and you will have a clear plan in mind so that when you need to act, you'll know what to do. And you won't have to think about it. You'll just be able to act. Because let's face it, when you're confronted by the stress of a an emergency, um, your critical thinking capabilities go down to zero. You need to have some guide for you to get yourself safe and to get yourself organized as best as possible. Um, so, what are some things? I would definitely set aside some resources in advance. By that, I mean boxes, plastic bins, put them under your bed. Have them there so that you can get stuff packed up quickly after an event occurs or before you have to evacuate. We touched on it before, but I think you should have a go bag in your house, another in your car, and those go bags should include, amongst other things, a few $100s in small bills in cash because ATMs are going to be down, credit card readers are going to be down after an earthquake, and you're going to need money. Um, Cash is still king when it comes to a disaster, and you'll be glad that you have it. Um, those are just some things. Know where all of your important documents are. Put them all in the same place so you can grab them quickly. Um, Make sure that you know how to collect all of your important medications, your spare keys to your house, pet food, a spare leash and harness, a pet carrier, all of those things that you're gonna need when you have to dash out of the house. Um, anyway, I think I've covered some of that, but the important thing is to make sure that you are going to be able to manage for days or maybe even a couple of weeks on your own.
As far as a go bag goes, do I need to have one in my car right now, or do I have to know what's going to go in it? So if we have a warning for a disaster, then I prepare the go bag.
Right. As far as I'm concerned, you should have a go bag prepared and sitting in a closet in your house. It should be done and ready to go. That's why they call it a go bag. It
Okay.
should be prepared. Same goes for one in your car. What happens if an event occurs, Jeff, if you're away from home? You're going to need to hike someplace. So you're going to want a pair of comfortable shoes in your trunk. You're going to want the go bag you can sling over your shoulders so that you can hike to wherever you need to go. You may not be able to drive simply because the roads are not drivable. I don't know if you remember what happened after Northridge, but most of the freeways in the San Fernando Valley had a very interesting little thing happen. Every overpass was suddenly 4 to 6 inches higher than the road bed that led up to and led away from the overpass. So, what did that mean? Well, the day after that quake, my wife and I and our two sons were driving at 15 miles an hour on the San Diego freeway just so that we could pass over all of those overpasses safely. You couldn't do it faster than that. So it's entirely conceivable that roads will be undrivable after a major quake. And what that means is you have to be prepared to walk
Hmm.
many miles in some cases. So have your go bag in the trunk of your car at all times. Have another one in the house. If you're able to evacuate from your house in your car, put the both go bags in your car. Won't hurt.
Right. At the risk of making this a lot longer recording, is there kind of a summary that you can give for the listeners that are business owners? I know this is your specialty is for business owners. Is there a overview, maybe a teaser that you can share, and then people can reach out to you directly for any other kind of resources that they might need
Sure.
for a business?
Yeah. Um, the approach that I take in creating business recovery plans with clients is one that may seem a little odd at first, but you can't write separate business recovery plans for a fire, for a pandemic, for supply chain disruption, for a employee strike. You can't write separate plans for each of those individual events. It would be unworkable and really a silly waste of time. Instead, what I do is I work with clients in writing a plan for three impact scenarios. One is a loss of data and systems. The other is a loss of building and workplace and asset, or it's a loss of qualified trained personnel. If you have plans that account for those three impact scenarios, that will pretty much prepare you for any kind of an event. Now, the other thing that I want to impart to everybody about business recovery plans is when a individual event occurs, the initial event may cause one of those three business impacts, but it's inevitable that the first event will precipitate others that will then create other business impacts. That's why the plans that I create have checklists that will allow people to pick and choose those items that are applicable depending on the kind of situation they are dealing with, but they are prepared for all three business impact scenarios. So, in a very small nutshell, that's what business recovery planning is all about. That's separate from crisis management plans, which are what are you going to do to respond initially and to be able to stabilize the event and make sure that people are safe before you can think about anything else. Is just what are you going to do if there's an active shooter? What are you going to do if there's a fire? What happens if there's an earthquake that damages your building? These are things that a crisis management plan will do, will guide you through before you can talk about business recovery.
So anybody listening can tell There's a lot of information that goes into everything that you just said. So if you're a business owner and have some questions or would like to speak to David further about it, please reach out to him.
Yes.
What are some resources that you recommend people use to be better prepared?
I think that's a great question. And look, this is just my personal favorites. There are plenty to be had, but I'm going to just run down a list and I've got them written down here so I don't forget. The first is the American Red Cross, which is a really good resource for preparation and guiding you how to prepare. Um, there's also in Ventura County, I encourage you to sign up for VC Alert, which is you can get at readyventuracounty.org/VC-alert. And in LA County, you can sign up for Alert LA County, which is alert.lacounty.gov. In the city of LA, you can sign up for Notify LA, which is at emergency.lacity.gov/notify LA. There are some apps that I would recommend, one of them being Watch Duty, which was phenomenal during the wildfires in January because it pushes notifications to you about every fire that happens in the area. And it gives you a map, it gives you a status report, it will push notifications about updates on those fires. It's enormously valuable to have that information and to be able to refer to it. And the app did a phenomenal job. Um, so I would encourage that. In, in the case of earthquake preparation, there's something called the MyShake app, which you can download, which will give you seconds to minutes warning of a major earthquake coming to you. That'll give you enough time to duck, cover, and hold, which is, I mean, seconds count in that regard. I would also download the Odyssey app. That's Audacy app, which allows you to stream radio stations. Um, I evacuated for a couple of days during this last set of wildfires to an area outside of Southern California. I was able to listen to KNX and all their news coverage on Odyssey with no problems, and it was real-time streaming. You can also stream local television on your laptop. So these are just things that you need to know how to do. And the Odyssey app is fantastic. The Watch Duty app is fantastic. Um, for business owners, there are a number of mass notification platforms that you can use that will allow you to rapidly and effectively, efficiently communicate with all of your employees. These mass notification tools are tried and proven tools for people. There are a few that are the mainstays in the business that are the most well-known and well-established. I'll just read them off. The first is alertmedia.com, all one word. The next is everbridge.com. And the final one is onsolve, onsolve.com. Each of those are well-established and well-known mass notification tools. And if you're a business owner, you should have a mass notification tool available, and you should practice using it regularly and make sure that the data that it uses is current and up to date. So those are my best hits for resources that people should consider.
Thank you, and thank you for enunciating and speaking slowly. Thank you for that.
Sure.
While attempting to be as comprehensive as possible, and I'm sure I left out asking you questions, are there any final pieces of advice that stand out to you that you'd like to share?
I'm going to keep saying the word preparation because it's very important. The key to preparation is making sure that you or your business can continue to operate and do the important things to manage your affairs. If you prepare to do those things, then you've done the best you can do. Um, and if you're in business, it's really important to have a um, crisis management and a business recovery plan that you've tested and that is kept current. Those are things that you can do yourself or you can hire a professional to work with you to do.
And if somebody wants to hire a professional, maybe like a David Gering, how would somebody reach out to you? What are the different ways people can reach out to you?
Sure. They can reach out to me at 805-630-9731, or they can email me at david@resiliencebcm.com. And my website is uh, resiliencebcm.com. Um, I will be happy to talk with anybody and answer questions. These are very important things. I will just tell you a little aside. When I first got into this profession, my sister had something funny to tell me. When I told her what I was going to do, she said, "You know, you're going to be paid to do what you do best, worry." And the fact is, I don't worry so much as just mentally prepare. And that's what it takes is to mentally prepare and physically prepare before a disaster strikes.
I would think you would probably worry less because of the preparation that you've done.
I tell you, I sleep better at night knowing I've got my checklists. I have a separate checklist for evacuating and another one for a power shutoff. And I'm prepared with go bags and I know how I'm going to evacuate. So I feel better about that.
I'm just thinking as far as a power shutoff goes, what is your opinion regarding a generator?
Well, if there's any indication in my answer, the first thing I'll say is I have a generator. And a few years back, when Southern California Edison was just cutting people's power with virtually no notice and for no real good reason, they weren't doing surgical kinds of power shutoffs. It was just across the city. I was glad to have the generator so that I could keep my refrigerator running. It didn't do me a whole lot of good when it came to talking about my router and modem because they're only as good as the system serving it. And if your cable provider goes down because they don't have power, then your cable router and modem won't be worth anything, even if you can run power to them. So, do I think a generator is worthwhile? Yes, just to keep your food from spoiling and to charge up your home electronics, your personal electronics. But beyond that, I'm not sure it's going to do you a whole lot of good. Um, that's not to say they aren't valuable. But the important thing is to be ready for waking up in the dark, to be ready for having no lights for 8 or 12 hours a day, depending on what time of year it happens, and to be able to function in your house without light.
And do you have propane? Do you have gas power? Do you have a combination?
I have a generator that runs on either gas or propane. And it's also called an inverter, which means that I can plug electronics directly into it without frying the electronics. So I can not only run the refrigerator, but I can also plug in um, a I'm running I don't have the word for it right now in my head, but basically I can plug in a set of plugs so that I can plug in various electronics to that and be able to run it. Power strip,
Okay.
power strip. Yeah, you can plug a power strip in directly into the generator, and then you can then plug your electronics onto the power strip.
Okay. And I think one last question. I've seen the big block batteries. So the benefit is that you can run it inside the house.
Yes.
Do you feel a generator and one of those big blocks just to cover both inside outside and then you can charge up the big block battery that's inside with the generator or
Those are great ideas. And that, one of the problems with running a generator is you have to put it outside.
yeah.
And if it's basically that means that you can't close and shut your sliding glass door or your back door. You have to run a cord through into the house. So there's that. The idea of having one of those battery blocks that you're referring to, um, they're great for running an appliance. The larger ones will run a refrigerator, but they don't last forever. And I would not count on solar panels to recharge that. I know that some of them come with solar panels, but I would not count on a solar panel fully charging one of those battery blocks. A generator will do a better job of that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very, very
Pleasure.
comprehensive.
Been a pleasure. I hope that it helps people who are listening to get a little bit more motivated to do the preparation that's necessary so that they will be able to sleep better at night, like I do.
Thank you, David. Again, you have David's contact information. He is a wealth of knowledge and really grateful I can call you a friend. Thank,
Me too.
thank
Me
you,
too.
David.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay.
Take care.